The man his wife was cheating with got into a car accident and desperately needed a liver transplant. The only match, unbelievably, was Ethan's own mother. The day Serafina Shaw forced his mother onto the operating table, Ethan Miller knelt on the floor, forehead bloody from bowing, begging her. Instead, she had him locked in a secure room. 3 days later, the surgery was a success. Serafina stood before him, her eyes as cold as if looking at a stranger. The surgery went well. I've arranged for someone to look after your mother. I'll be at the hospital with Julian for the next few days. I won't be home. Ethan stared at the woman who had once moved heaven and earth for him. Finally, just as she turned to leave, he managed to choke out, "Serafina, you love me so much. Why did you suddenly stop?" Her steps faltered, but she didn't look back. "We have a marriage of convenience. When did I ever love you?" The moment the door clicked shut, Ethan slid down the wall, tears streaming. Never loved him? How could she have never loved him? In his past life, she had loved him. Desperately. That's right, Ethan Miller had been reborn. In his previous life, the Miller and Shaw families had arranged their marriage. Ethan had married Serafina. Back then, she had been utterly devoted to him, her love profound. If he wanted the stars, she'd never offer the moon. If he casually mentioned liking a particular multi-million-dollar watch, it would appear before him the next day. When he was sick, she'd stay by his bedside, sleepless all night long. But he had despised her, because the one he loved was a childhood sweetheart, Chloe Davis. Forced by his parents to marry Serafina, he'd resisted the marriage to an extreme. He refused to share a bed with her, wouldn't accompany her to galas, and even frequented bars, picking up women, deliberately humiliating her. Finally, manipulated by Chloe's lies, he'd eloped with her. He never imagined Chloe didn't love him at all. Her elaborate efforts to win his heart were merely because the Davis and Shaw families had a long-standing feud. She'd long seen Serafina's secret crush on Ethan and concocted this plan to use him against her. She'd had him kidnapped, using his life to threaten Serafina Shaw, "Send one of your fingers every day, or I'll kill him." Serafina hadn't said a word. She just cut off one of her fingers each day and sent it. On the 10th day, when the final bloody finger, still bearing her wedding ring, arrived, Ethan broke. Unwilling to let Serafina continue her foolish sacrifice, he bit off his own tongue and died. After death, his spirit floated in the air, watching the usually composed and aloof Serafina go insane upon seeing his body. She hunted down his captors, personally breaking every bone in Chloe Davis's body, listening to her screams, her own eyes filled only with a dead emptiness. Finally, she abandoned her billion-dollar fortune, abandoned the entire Shaw Corp, and, cradling his body, perished with him in a raging fire. In the inferno, she kissed his lips with a devout and profound love, whispering, "Ethan, if there's a next life, can you love me just once?" The moment the flames consumed her, Ethan, floating above, wept inconsolably. In that instant, he finally understood the depth of her love. When he opened his eyes again, he found he'd been reborn, back in the first year of his marriage to Serafina. He was ecstatic, tears welling up. This time, he swore he would love Serafina with all his heart. So, he deleted all of Chloe's contact information, made Serafina breakfast every morning, waited up for her until late at night when she came home from work, his world revolving entirely around her. But she had changed. She was no longer gentle with him, no longer came home every day. Not only was she cold and distant, but she had even started keeping a college student on the side. And now, to save that lover's life, she had forcibly taken his mother for surgery. After Serafina left, he slumped onto the cold floor, his tears spent. Fine. If she didn't love him in this life, then he would let go completely and utterly. Ethan stumbled to his feet, dragging his exhausted body to the hospital. When he pushed open the door, his mother was still asleep, her face terrifyingly pale, her breathing shallow, but even under the oxygen mask. He stood by her bed, looking at her frail body in the hospital gown, a lump choking his throat. "Ethan," he whipped around to see his father, Robert, standing at the door, travel-worn, his suit jacket wrinkled, tie askew, clearly having rushed back from overseas. "Dad," Ethan's voice cracked. His knees buckled, and he dropped to the floor. "I'm sorry. It's all my fault." Robert rushed over in 3 strides and pulled him up. "Nonsense. The floor's freezing. What are you kneeling for?" His palm was rough and warm, yet it trembled slightly. "It's not your fault. How could this be your fault?" Ethan hung his head, tears splashing onto the linoleum. Robert sighed, gently patting his back. "Back then, it was Serafina who initiated the marriage alliance, saying she'd had a crush on you for years. His voice was filled with confusion. How did it suddenly turn into this? Dad. Ethan took a deep breath. I made up my mind. I want to divorce Serafina. Our family business is gradually shifting overseas anyway. Since that's the case, let's all leave this place. Robert fell silent. His gaze shifted between Ethan and his wife in the hospital bed. After a long while, he finally spoke. Are you sure you don't love her anymore? Ethan's fingernails dug deep into his palm, blood seeping from between his fingers, but he felt no pain. After what she did to Mom, his voice was as light as a falling leaf, trembling and breaking in the air. How can I continue to love her? Robert was silent again for a moment, then sighed heavily, as if having made a difficult decision. In that case, we'll leave. He patted Ethan's shoulder. Go handle the paperwork. I'll take care of things here. Ethan nodded, his eyes red, and turned to leave the room. The immigration paperwork at the USCIS office went smoothly. Stepping out of the building, the sunlight stung his eyes. He stood by the roadside, a sense of unreality washing over him. It was finally ending. Just then, he heard the sharp screech of tires. Watch out! Before he could turn, a massive impact sent him flying. Ethan woke to a searing pain. The moment he opened his eyes, Serafina's cold, beautiful face was inches away. She looked down at him, her disgust undisguised. Ethan Miller, are you doing this on purpose? You saw Julian get hurt in a car accident, so you decided to copy him? She sneered, her voice like ice. Let me tell you, ours is a marriage of convenience. There are no feelings involved. No matter how much you try to be like him, it's useless. I don't have time to take care of you. He opened his mouth, about to explain, when the hospital room door was suddenly pushed open. Ms. Shaw, the soup you asked for. An assistant respectfully handed over a takeout container. Serafina took it, glanced inside, and her brow instantly furrowed. Why is it seafood bisque? Her voice was clearly displeased. He's allergic to seafood. Go get another one. That sentence struck Ethan like a lightning bolt. Allergic to seafood. In their previous life, in the second year of their marriage, he had accidentally eaten seafood and nearly gone into anaphylactic shock. That's when she found out. But now, they had only been married a year. He thought about her strange behavior recently. Her sudden distance, her inexplicable favoritism towards Julian Vance, and that phrase, when did I ever love you? A preposterous idea shot through him, and Ethan trembled all over. Serafina. His voice was raspy beyond recognition. Are you also reborn? Serafina, Shaw frowned. What rebirth? He stared in her eyes. Then how did you know I'm allergic to seafood? Your parents came to see me a while ago, she said, her expression perfectly composed, not even an eyelash flickering. They asked me to be nicer to you. They also gave me a notebook with your likes and dislikes. I glanced at it before tossing it. Her explanation was flawless, yet it stung his heart. Was he overthinking it? A nurse suddenly pushed the door open. Ms. Shaw, Mr. Vance is awake and asking for you. Hearing this, Serafina left without a backward glance, not even sparing Ethan a look. For 3 days in the hospital, Serafina didn't visit him once. The hesitant, pitying looks the nurses gave him each time they came to change his dressings felt like silent mockery of his pathetic state. On the morning of the 4th day, Ethan discharged himself. The immigration papers were processed. All that was left to do before leaving was the final step, divorce. He sat at his desk, meticulously writing out the divorce agreement. The nib of the fountain pen scratched across the paper, like his heart being torn apart. The terms of the agreement were simple. He wanted nothing, only his freedom. His phone vibrated. It was an update on Julian Vance's Instagram. In the photo, Serafina sat at her office desk, while Julian stood behind her chair, his arms around her shoulders. The caption read, someone said non-staff are never allowed in her office, but she made an exception for me today, face blowing a kiss. Ethan's finger hovered over the screen, unmoving for a long time. In his past life, Serafina had broken countless rules for him just like this. She who never ate spicy food had accompanied him for Nashville hot chicken, so spicy it sent her to the emergency room for a stomach pump. She, a notorious germaphobe, had carried him home when he was drunk. She who hated public appearances had agreed to a magazine interview for him. Ethan took a deep breath, pushing those images from his mind, and picked up the divorce papers, heading out. The Shaw Corp tower was still as imposing as ever. As the elevator ascended, Ethan was still contemplating how to bring up the divorce. Passing the executive office, Serafina's assistant happened to be walking by with a stack of documents. Mr. Miller. The assistant was clearly surprised. Are you here to see Ms. Shaw? Yes. Ethan clutched the manila envelope in his hand. I need her to sign something. The assistant's gaze lingered on his pale face for a moment. I'm just about to go in. I can take it in for you. Ethan hesitated for a second, then handed over the divorce agreement. Thank you, I appreciate it. The assistant took the document, slipped it into a pile of papers, and knocked lightly on the door. The moment the door opened, Ethan's blood ran cold. Serafina was kneeling on one knee, gently massaging Julian Vance's foot as he lounged on the sofa. Julian, wearing shorts, had his calf resting on her knee, a sweet smile on his face. Ms. Shaw, these documents require your signature. The assistant's voice made Serafina look up. Busy with Julian's massage, she signed the documents brought to her without even looking at them. Ethan stood outside the door, his hands clenched into tight fists. In his past life, when he'd sprained his ankle playing basketball, Serafina had knelt just like that, carefully applying ointment. That day, her brow had been furrowed with concern, afraid to even touch him too hard. Soon, the assistant came out and handed the divorce agreement back to Ethan. Mr. Miller, it's signed. Ethan looked at the 3 words of her flourishing signature on the divorce agreement, his eyes involuntarily reddening. He mumbled a thank you and turned to leave. While waiting for the elevator, he called his lawyer. We've both signed. How long until the divorce decree is finalized? Sir, after the 1-month cooling-off period, it can be finalized. He nodded. Just as he hung up, Julian's voice came from behind him. Ethan, what are you doing here? Ethan spun around to see Serafina, letting go of Julian's hand, her face darkening as she walked towards him. Who allowed you to come to the company? She grabbed his wrist. How many times do I have to tell you? This is a marriage of convenience. I don't interfere with you, and you don't interfere with me. Ethan pulled his hand away. Understood. It won't happen again. Sensing the escalating tension, Julian quickly stepped forward, putting an arm around Serafina's shoulder. Serafina, don't be like that. He's still your husband, after all. Then, he turned to Ethan. Ethan, good timing. Serafina and I are going to an auction. Why don't you join us? Your mother saved my life, and I haven't even given her a gift to show my gratitude yet. No need, Ethan interrupted. My mother doesn't need it. Julian's eyes instantly reddened. But if you don't go, I'll feel terrible. Ethan Miller, Serafina said coldly. If she asks you to go, then go. Don't be ungrateful. Her gaze was ice cold, a stark contrast to the gentle way she used to look at him in their past life. Ethan suddenly felt exhausted, too tired to even argue. In the end, Ethan Miller was forced to go to the auction. He sat in the auction hall, the clamor of bidding rising and falling around him. Serafina Shaw raised her paddle with an elegant, composed air, each increment in her bid drawing gasps from those around them. 50 million. Ms. Shaw bids 50 million, the auctioneer exclaimed excitedly. This sapphire belongs to Ms. Shaw. Julian Vance sat beside Serafina, a victor smile on his face. Serafina, this gemstone is truly beautiful. As long as you like it. Serafina gently brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead. Ms. Shaw is way too good to this boy toy, isn't she? Spoiling him rotten. Someone whispered from the back row. That's nothing, another voice chimed in. Last month, Mr. Vance casually mentioned liking that island in the Pacific, worth over 100 million. Ms. Shaw transferred the ownership to him the very next day. Ethan clenched the bidding paddle in his hand, his knuckles white. In his past life, Serafina had spoiled him rotten just like this. But now, the same tenderness was given to another man. Ethan, Julian suddenly leaned in. Which piece do you like? I'll have Serafina bid on it for you. Ethan shook his head coldly. No, thank you. Then let's see the next one, Julian persisted. Maybe there's something you'll like. The auctioneer banged his gavel. The next item is quite special. Ladies and gentlemen, please take a look. The moment the large screen lit up, the entire hall erupted in an uproar. The photo showed Julian Vance's face being pressed into the wet, filthy floor of a public restroom, his face bruised and swollen, utterly humiliated. The high definition and censor close-up made Julian's expression exceptionally clear. Oh my God, this boy toy was even forced to drink urine. That's disgusting. I wonder if Ms. Shaw knows. Whispers instantly filled the venue. Julian's face turned from red to white, finally settling on a deathly gray. Turn it off. Turn it off now, he shrieked, jumping to his feet, trembling all over. That's not me. It's not me. He whirled towards Ethan, tears streaming down his face. Ethan, do you hate me this much? Do you have to humiliate me like this? You're trying to drive me to my death. With that, he rushed out. Serafina's face was terrifyingly grim. I'm buying all these photos. Take them down in 3 seconds. 1 second late, and I'll shut down your auction house. Her sharp gaze swept across the room. Anyone who dares to leak a single word about today's events will face the consequences. Finally, she looked at Ethan, her voice as cold as ice. You just wait. Ethan's mind went blank, his body chilled to the bone as he returned to the villa. He didn't know how those photos had appeared at the auction. He disliked Julian, and he could be arrogant, but he would never humiliate him in such a way. Besides, he didn't even have those photos. But Serafina wouldn't believe him. She would only think he was making excuses. He sat on the sofa, waiting all night. It wasn't until dawn that the front door was violently kicked open. Serafina burst in, radiating fury, her eyes bloodshot. Ethan Miller. She lunged at him, her hands closing around his neck, her grip so tight it nearly suffocated him. Do you know Julian jumped into the ocean? Her voice was hoarse. If I hadn't gotten there in time, he'd be a corpse right now. It wasn't me. Ethan managed to gasp out. I didn't release those photos. Not you. She sneered, abruptly releasing her grip. Are you going to tell me he released those photos himself? Ethan was speechless. Just as he was about to speak, Serafina said coldly, We have a marriage of convenience. We stay out of each other's affairs. But you've hurt the person I love most again and again. You will pay the price. Her words were like a knife, stabbing viciously into his heart. In their past life, she had protected him just like this. Back then, she'd said, Anyone who dares to touch Ethan, I'll make their entire family pay. But now, the person she protected was someone else. Ethan Miller, you will go to the hospital right now, this instant, and apologize to Julian. Ethan's eyes reddened, but he looked at her stubbornly. I did nothing wrong. I truly don't know what I'm supposed to apologize for. Serafina sneered and snapped her fingers. 2 bodyguards immediately entered and restrained him. Take him to the basement, Serafina said, walking out without a backward glance. When he understands his mistake, then you can let him go. The basement? Ethan stared at her in disbelief. To make him apologize to Julian, she was actually going to have him tortured? Before he could react, he was dragged into the cold, damp basement and forced onto a metal chair. A bodyguard efficiently strapped down his hands and feet, the cold leather biting into his flesh. The moment the bodyguard flicked a switch on a device that looked like a modified stun gun, ARG, a powerful electric current shot through his body. Ethan arched like a fish out of water, only to be slammed back down by the restraints. His teeth bit through his lip, the taste of blood filling his mouth. Are you going to apologize? The bodyguard pressed a button, increasing the current. It felt like thousands of steel needles coursing through his veins, from his fingertips to his heart. He heard inhuman whimpers escaping his throat, his teeth mangling his lower lip. He shook his head, his hair matted to his face with cold sweat. He was not wrong. Why should he apologize? The current surged again, stronger this time. His vision began to blur, his muscles spasming uncontrollably. Ugh. A third time. A fourth. A fifth. A 10th. Stop. Stop it. He finally broke down, sobbing, tears mixed with blood streaming down his face. I was wrong. I apologize. I'll go apologize. I apologize. Ethan Miller was forcibly taken to a VIP hospital room. Finally decided to admit your mistake? Serafina Shaw sat by the bedside, looking at him coldly. Ethan's legs were still trembling uncontrollably. The muscle spasms after the electrocution made every step feel like walking on knives. He had to lean against the wall to barely stay upright, his vision intermittently blackening. I'm sorry. His voice was a hoarse wreck. I shouldn't have released those photos of you being bullied. Julian Vance leaned against the headboard, his face pale. Ethan, if it were any other time, I might let it go. But you went too far this time. So, I don't accept an apology like this. Serafina immediately leaned over, cradling him, her voice unbelievably gentle. Then what do you want? At least get on your knees. That would show some sincerity, wouldn't it? Ethan's head snapped up, only to meet Serafina's icy gaze. Still not kneeling? What? Do you want another taste of the current? He shuddered, his knees hitting the hard floor with a thud. I'm sorry. Only then did Julian give a reluctant grunt. All right, I forgive you. Walking out of the room, Ethan's vision went black, and he nearly collapsed. He leaned against the wall for a long time before he could manage to drag his body away. That evening, Serafina actually brought Julian back to their marital home. Julian's not in a good mental state. He'll be staying here for a while, she said calmly, as if discussing the weather. Ethan no longer had the strength to argue. Suit yourself. Anyway, they were already in the process of divorcing. Soon, this wouldn't be his home anymore. Serafina frowned, seeming to notice his unusual demeanor. Just as she was about to speak, Julian tugged her sleeve. Serafina, I'm hungry. What do you want to eat? I'll have the housekeeper make it. It's so late. Let's not bother them. Julian smiled sheepishly, but his gaze was fixed on Ethan. Isn't Ethan here? Let him do it. Serafina looked at Ethan. Didn't you hear? How ironic. He, the legitimate husband, was reduced to cooking for his wife's lover. Ethan forced a smile and mechanically walked to the kitchen. The scalding chili oil bubbled in the wok. Ethan stared numbly at the bubbles. Is the hot pot ready yet? Julian's voice suddenly came from behind. Almost. Ethan didn't turn around. Julian leaned in for a look, then suddenly frowned. Ethan, is this all? There aren't enough ingredients. Before his words faded, he violently grabbed Ethan's wrist and plunged it into the boiling pot. Excruciating pain shot from his hand up his arm. Ethan instinctively struggled. Scalding oil splattered everywhere. He finally managed to pull his hand out, the back of it already red and blistering. Julian, however, seized the opportunity to drip a few drops of the broth on his own arm, then dramatically fell to the floor. What happened? Serafina rushed in at the sound. Julian's eyes immediately reddened. Serafina, I shouldn't have asked Ethan to make me hot pot. Then he wouldn't have gotten angry and deliberately splashed the soup on my hand. Serafina's expression changed drastically. She rushed forward and grabbed Ethan's wrist. Are you ever going to stop? Did you not hear a single word I said last time? Ethan, pale with pain, tremblingly held up his red, blistered hand, his voice choked. Serafina, look clearly. Who's hurt worse? Serafina froze. It wasn't me. Julian quickly defended himself. Serafina, he splashed me first, then deliberately burned himself because he was afraid you'd get angry. Ethan, his eyes red, said word by word. There are security cameras here. We just need to check the footage. Julian's face changed. Just as he was about to speak, Serafina cut him off sharply. No need to check. I believe Julian wouldn't do such a thing. Hearing this, Julian instantly let out a sigh of relief, casting a triumphant, provocative glance at Ethan. Ethan's heart felt like it was being ripped in two. One half was the burning pain in his hand, the other a more intense ache in his chest. Ethan Miller, you're truly incorrigible, Serafina said coldly. Since you like scalding people with soup so much, then you can have your fill. She snapped her fingers. Two bodyguards immediately entered and seized Ethan's other, uninjured hand. No, Ethan struggled in terror. Serafina, you'll regret this. Before he could finish, the bodyguards mercilessly slammed his hand into the boiling pot. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the entire villa. When Ethan Miller awoke from the excruciating pain, he found himself lying on the bedroom bed. Both hands were wrapped in thick gauze, a burning ache throbbing relentlessly. Sir, you're awake? Mrs. Davison, the housekeeper, sat by the bed, her eyes red. Your hands. I'll call Ms. Shaw right now and ask her to come back. No need. Ethan shook his head weakly. She's the one who had them burned. Mrs. Davison gasped. How was that possible? Ms. Shaw used to secretly follow you two and from school every day, terrified you'd get even a tiny scratch. Tears silently streamed from the corners of Ethan's eyes. See, everyone said she loved him. But why? Why had she suddenly stopped loving him? He didn't understand. He truly didn't understand. During the days he spent recovering, Ethan saw daily updates of their blissful life on Julian Vance's Instagram. Serafina took him to Paris for Fashion Week, rented out an entire amusement park for him, and even arranged a private fireworks display for his birthday. A week later, Serafina finally returned with Julian. And the first thing she said was, Ethan Miller, Julian's birthday is coming up. You will plan the party as penance for burning him. Ethan was too exhausted to even argue. He didn't want any more trouble before he left, so he just nodded. Okay. During the week he spent preparing for the birthday party, Ethan barely slept. Dragging his still unhealed hands, he personally selected every bouquet of flowers, confirmed every dish on the menu. The staff looked at him with pity, but no one dared to help. On the day of the birthday party, the entire Shaw estate was ablaze with lights. Guests whispered amongst themselves, the actual husband throwing a birthday party for his wife's young lover. That's unheard of. Ms. Shaw must be serious this time. Look at those gifts. Any one of them is worth a fortune. Ethan stood in a corner, deaf to these discussions. His gaze was fixed on Serafina, who stood center stage. She wore a black fishtail gown and kept checking her watch, clearly waiting for Julian to appear. Time ticked by, but Julian never showed. Serafina's expression grew increasingly grim. Finally, she sent her assistant to find him. Ms. Shaw. The assistant ran back in a panic, holding a letter. Mr. Vance is gone. He only left this. Serafina snatched the letter, and, after a quick scan, her face changed dramatically. Finally, she violently flung the letter at Ethan's face. Ethan Miller. Her voice sounded like it was squeezed from between her teeth. You better explain this to me. The letter fluttered to his feet. He picked it up, trembling. On it was Julian's neat handwriting. Serafina, by the time you read this, I will have left. I love you very much, and I wanted to grow old with you. But Ethan Miller threatened me with my parents' lives. I had no choice but to leave. From now on, we will never see each other again. It wasn't me. Ethan numbly handed the letter back. I didn't do this. You always say you didn't do it. Serafina grabbed his neck. But you never failed to do what you shouldn't. Ethan struggled to breathe, but stubbornly met her gaze. I really don't know. But Serafina didn't believe him. She was convinced he had driven Julian away. To force Julian's whereabouts out of him, she actually had Ethan's parents tied up on a rooftop of the Shaw Corp building. The elderly couple was suspended 100 meters in the air, their lives hanging by a single, thin rope. Speak. Where is Julian? Serafina's voice was like ice, her hands gripping his neck, forcing him to look at the edge of the rooftop. Only if you tell me where he is, will your parents live. Dad, Mom. Ethan never imagined she could love Julian so obsessively that she would be willing to kill his own parents for him. His voice was shattered, on the verge of collapse. I really don't know. I don't even know when he left. Serafina, I beg you, let my parents go. Let them go. They're innocent. They're innocent. Serafina, however, sneered and gestured with her hand. A bodyguard immediately pulled out a knife and slowly began to saw at the lifeline. No! The creak of the rope being cut by the knife was like a blunt saw grating on his nerves. I really don't know. He fell to his knees with a thud, his forehead almost bleeding. Serafina, I swear I really don't know. If I send him away, may I die a horrible death. Isn't dying a horrible death enough for you? The bodyguard held the knife, slowly cutting the lifeline. Serafina leaned down, gripping the back of his neck. Last time, where is he? Ethan looked up at her, his eyes filled with despair, suddenly feeling utterly disoriented. Was this cold, ruthless woman truly the same one who had cut off her fingers and died for him in their past life? Just as the rope was about to snap, a bodyguard rushed in. Ms. Shaw, we found Mr. Vance. He's at the airport. Serafina immediately released Ethan and rushed out without a backward glance. When the bodyguard scrambled to pull his parents up, the rope was connected by only the last few threads. Ethan scrambled over, only daring to cry out loud when he felt his parents' cold hands. Dad, Mom, the deep, bone-visible ligature marks on his mother's wrists, the bloody abrasions on his father's back from the rough wall, all became sharp blades piercing his heart. In the ambulance, his mother, Carol, tremblingly wiped away her tears. Ethan, before, she used to fret for half a day if you even got a paper cut on your finger. At that moment, Ethan's eyes were bloodshot, and he could no longer hold back his sobs. The wail of the ambulance siren pierced the night sky. Ethan Miller sat on a bench in the hospital corridor, his hands clenched into fists. The doctor had just told him his parents had only suffered a fright and were otherwise unharmed. He let out a long sigh of relief and gently closed their room door. Serafina, hold on. It's all my fault. Julian Vance's heart-wrenching cries suddenly came from the end of the corridor. Ethan looked up to see medical staff rushing past with a gurney. Serafina Shaw lay on it, her white blouse soaked in blood, her beautiful face devoid of color. Julian clung to her hand, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm sorry. It's all my fault. You diverted the plane to bring me back, and I still grabbed the steering wheel, insisting on getting out. Serafina weakly raised her hand, using her fingertips to wipe away his tears. As long as you don't leave, I'm willing to do anything. Ethan's heart clenched violently. He turned and quickly walked away. He didn't want to see any more, didn't dare to see any more. For the following days, Ethan stayed at the hospital, taking care of his parents. Every morning, he would cook a nourishing soup, watching his parents eat it spoonful by spoonful. In the corridor, the nurse's gossip occasionally reached his ears. Ms. Shaw really spoils Mr. Vance too much. She's so badly injured herself, yet she's still trying to cheer him up every day. Yeah, I heard Mr. Vance said he wanted cake from that bakery on the west side late at night, and Ms. Shaw immediately drove there to buy it, despite her injuries. Robert and Carol Miller looked at their son with concern, but saw him calmly peeling an apple, as if he hadn't heard a thing. Ethan, Carol began, hesitating. Mom, I'm fine. Ethan cut the apple into small pieces. I don't love her anymore. It was the truth. From the moment she forced his mother onto that operating table, his love for her had completely died. Now, his only thought was to leave safely with his parents. A week later, his parents' condition stabilized. Ethan, we're better now. You should go back and pack your things, Robert said, patting his son's shoulder. We're leaving soon, and we probably won't be back. Everything needs to be settled properly. Ethan nodded. Back at the villa, he was halfway through packing when the door was suddenly pushed open. Serafina stood in the doorway, her expression slightly grim. Julian has been through a lot lately. Go to that old wishing tree in Parker Meadow and get him a good luck charm. Her tone brooked no argument, as if she were instructing a servant. In the past, Ethan would have definitely refused. But now he just numbly nodded. Okay. He didn't dare resist anymore. The last time he refused, she nearly cost his parents their lives. He couldn't bear any more risks. The early morning air at Parker Meadow was shrouded in mist. Ethan took each of the 999 stone steps leading up to the Centennial Oak on his knees, one by one. His knees were raw and bloody, but he felt no pain. As he stood up, he inadvertently glanced at the ancient oak tree. It was covered in red wish ribbons, swaying gently in the wind. Curiosity drove him closer, but what he saw written on the ribbons struck him like a thunderbolt. May Ethan find joy and peace. Serafina, Shaw praying for Ethan's health. Serafina, Shaw hoping Ethan will fall in love with me. Serafina Shaw. Every red ribbon was a testament to Serafina's past deep love for him. The oldest one dated back to their high school days, the most recent from just before their marriage. Ethan gave a bitter smile and walked toward a small, quiet pavilion nearby. This time, he not only got the good luck charm Julian wanted, but also an extra pair of intertwined love charms. Before leaving, he borrowed a pair of scissors from a park ranger and returned to the Centennial Oak. One by one, he cut down those wish ribbons filled with love and dropped them into a small, smoldering brazier someone had left behind, watching them burn to ash. Sir, what are you? A young park volunteer looked at him, puzzled. Severing old ties, Ethan replied softly. After coming down from a meadow, he gave both the good luck charm and the love charms to Serafina. What's this? She frowned, holding up the pair of love charms. Love charms. I hope you and Julian will be happy together, forever. Ethan's tone was sincere, his eyes as calm as still water. Serafina looked at him deeply. Is that what you really think? He nodded. Of course. Serafina frowned at him for a long moment, seeming to want to say something, but in the end, she said nothing and just turned away. A few days later, it was the Shaw family's annual dinner. Ethan Miller hadn't wanted to go, but thinking of Grandpa Shaw, whom he hadn't seen in a long time, he changed his clothes and went. He was leaving soon. At the very least, he had to say goodbye to the old man. As soon as he arrived at the old estate, he saw Serafina Shaw walk in, hand in hand with Julian Vance, under the watchful eyes of everyone present. Bringing her lover to the Shaw family dinner was a blatant slap in his face. But Ethan no longer felt any heartache, nor did he care. He ignored the whispers and went straight to his grandfather's bedroom. Grandpa, Serafina and I, we're divorced. Upon entering, he got straight to the point, telling Arthur Shaw Sr. about his plans to leave. Hearing this, Grandpa Shaw sat up abruptly, quickly grasping Ethan's hand. Child, are you angry with Serafina? Listen to me. She clearly likes you. The young man she's with. There must be some misunderstanding. Grandpa, Ethan gave a bitter smile. Please don't try to persuade me. I've thought it through very clearly. Given what she's done to me recently, regardless of her feelings for Julian, there's no possibility for us anymore. Sensing the pain and resolve in his voice, Grandpa Shaw let out a long sigh. So be it. It's her loss. Ethan, remember this. Even if you're no longer my grandson-in-law, you'll always be my most beloved grandson. As long as I'm alive, that boy toy won't even dream of crossing the threshold of the Shaw family. Ethan's nose tingled. In his past life, Grandpa Shaw had protected him just like this. Grandpa, you should rest. He stood up to leave. I'll go get you a glass of warm milk. Ethan went out to get a glass of milk. When he returned and was about to knock, he heard a muffled thud from the doorway. You old fool. Julian Vance's voice came from the partially open door. Still dare to stop me from becoming a Shaw-in-law? I'll kill you. Ethan's blood instantly ran cold. He violently pushed open the door and saw Julian pressing a pillow hard against Grandpa Shaw's face. The old man's aged hands clawed feebly at the bedsheets, already close to losing consciousness. What are you doing? Ethan rushed forward and shoved Julian away. The pillow fell to the floor. Grandpa Shaw's face was bluish-purple. He was already unconscious. Help! Call an ambulance. Ethan's shouts drew everyone. Serafina, was the first to rush in. Seeing the scene, her face changed drastically. "Grandpa!" She lifted the old man and rushed out, her eyes like ice as she passed Ethan. The lights in the hospital corridor were stark and blinding. The operating room light stayed on all night. Ethan sat on a bench, his hands trembling uncontrollably. Julian leaned against Serafina, occasionally shooting venomous glances at him. As dawn broke, the doctor finally emerged. Ms. Shaw, Mr. Shaw Sr., was deprived of oxygen for too long. It's highly probable he'll be in a vegetative state. Serafina slammed her fist against the wall, her knuckles instantly bloody. In the VIP room, Serafina looked at the two of them, her face grim. What exactly happened? It was him. Julian immediately pointed at Ethan, screaming, "He tried to kill Grandpa?" When I went in, he was smothering Grandpa's face with a pillow. Ethan stared at him in disbelief. "Say that again. No matter how many times I say it, it's the truth." Julian cried pitifully. "Serafina, you don't know. He almost killed me too." Serafina's gaze grew colder and colder, finally turning into an icy blade that pierced Ethan's heart. "Ethan Miller, Grandpa was so good to you. How could you do it?" "It wasn't me." Ethan Miller's voice trembled. "It was Julian. I saw him with my own eyes." "Enough." Serafina Shaw cut him off sharply. "Ethan Miller, you will pay the price for this." She snapped her fingers, and two bodyguards immediately stepped forward and seized Ethan. "Serafina." Ethan struggled. "Believe me this once, just this once." Serafina sneered. "Take him to the amusement park." In the early hours of a late autumn morning, the amusement park was deserted. Ethan was dragged to the tallest drop tower, the cold wind making him shiver uncontrollably. "Strap him in," Serafina commanded coldly. Ethan's face turned deathly pale. "No, Serafina, you know I'm terrified of heights." "It's precisely because I know that I want you to remember this lesson." Serafina personally fastened his safety harness. "When you decide to tell the truth, then I'll let you down." The drop tower slowly ascended. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. When the ride reached its highest point, he was trembling like a leaf. "Aor!" The machine suddenly plummeted. The feeling of weightlessness made Ethan's heart nearly stop. He screamed, his tears carried away by the wind into the night sky. Once, twice, 3 times. As the sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn, Serafina finally called a halt. When Ethan was released, he was barely conscious, his lips bitten raw and bloody. "Have you thought it through?" Serafina looked down at him. Ethan opened his mouth, suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood, and then completely lost consciousness. In a daze, he seemed to hear Serafina calling his name, but soon, an endless darkness swallowed all his awareness. The smell of disinfectant stung Ethan's temples, making them throb. He opened his eyes and saw Serafina standing by the bed, her long fingers holding 3 plane tickets. "Ethan Miller, you've been causing nothing but trouble lately. First, you bullied Julian, then you harmed Grandpa. I don't want to see you anymore." She placed the tickets on the nightstand, her face cold. "Take your parents and go abroad to cool off. When you've repented, I'll bring you back." Ethan stared at the tickets, a bitter laugh almost escaping him. In her past life, she had cut off her fingers and died for him. In this life, she couldn't wait to banish him to the ends of the earth. He said nothing, silently taking the tickets. Seeing him so compliant, Serafina frowned. "You're just agreeing like that? Nothing to say?" Ethan slowly looked up. He wanted to say so much. He wanted to say she had wrongly trusted Julian, that she had betrayed his true heart, that Grandpa had been framed. But in the end, he just shook his head gently. "Ms. Shaw." A nurse knocked softly on the door. "Mr. Vance says he has chest pains and has been asking for you." "Understood. Tell him I'll be there shortly." Serafina replied, then turned to Ethan, her voice cold. "To prevent you from running off midway, I'll personally take you to the airport." On the way to the airport, Ethan secretly texted his parents. "Mom, Dad, bring my divorce decree. Let's meet at the airport. We're leaving immediately." After sending the message, he tilted his head slightly and saw Serafina's profile reflected in the car window, looking exceptionally cold. In the period just after he was reborn, he had been ecstatic, wanting desperately to make it up to her, to pour all his love into her. So he had clung to her like a shadow, constantly around her. Back then, he had loved watching her drive, finding even her slender fingers on the steering wheel incredibly sexy. But looking at her now, his heart felt like a stagnant pond. "We're here." Serafina stopped the car. "I'll see you inside." The departure hall was bustling with people. Serafina had intended to watch him go through security, but Julian's call suddenly came through. Julian? Serafina answered, her voice instantly softening. Don't be afraid. I'll be right back with you. She hung up, didn't even glance at Ethan again, and strode away. Ethan stood there, watching her back disappear into the crowd, before walking towards his parents. Ethan, here's your divorce decree. His father, Robert, handed him a crimson booklet. Okay. Ethan took it, a smile of relief finally gracing his face. He tore the 3 tickets to Paris that Serafina had given him to shreds, tossed them into a trash can, and then went to the counter to buy 3 tickets to Switzerland. Dad, Mom, let's go. Under the fading light, the family walked towards the boarding gate, their figures resolute. Meanwhile, Serafina rushed back to the hospital as fast as she could. Just as she stepped out of the hospital elevator, heading towards Julian's room, a TV in the waiting area suddenly switched to a breaking news bulletin. Latest news. Flight MU-587 from New York to Paris crashed shortly after takeoff. All 132 passengers on board are presumed dead. Hearing this, Serafina's steps faltered, her blood instantly freezing. MU-587 wasn't that. The flight she had booked for Ethan Miller. Thud. The moment the phone slipped from Serafina Shaw's palm, the tempered glass screen protector spiderwebbed against the tile floor like a shattered galaxy. The special ringtone she'd set exclusively for Julian Vance continued to vibrate, like a drill boring through her ear canal into her brain. An hour ago, this melody had been coated in honey. Now, every note sprouted barbs. Serafina's irises burned, the afterimage of the news headlines seared onto her retinas. Those bold block letters were melting into asphalt, pouring down her optic nerves into her skull. Flight MU-587 crashed 3 minutes after takeoff. No survivors. Crashed. No survivors. No survivors. Dead. Ethan Miller was dead. No, it can't be impossible. Just an hour ago, Serafina had personally taken Ethan to the airport. She clearly remembered his voice, his eyes, even the color of the clothes he was wearing. How could such a vibrant person suddenly be gone? No, he had to be alive. Serafina scrambled to pick up her phone, her fingers fumbling frantically for over a minute before she managed to unlock the screen. The flight number, which should have been cruising at altitude, was now floating in her notification bar, followed by the 2 stark, red words, crashed. Serafina pressed her finger to the glass, trying to focus, but the cold, hard touch climbed up her arm, rapidly crystallizing it into a glacier. She belatedly realized she was trembling. No, the entire building was shaking. She didn't know how she ran out of the hospital, nor how she got in her car. In the dark, rainy night, her black Maybach flashed across the highway, the accelerator pressed to the floor by Serafina, her bloodshot eyes fixed Raishi on the road ahead. Faster, faster, even faster. The early morning airport was crammed with people. Screams, wails, sobs, and curses mingled into a chaotic din. Why did the plane crash? Give them back. Give me my family back. I'll kill you all. The immense grief overflowing from countless people coalesced into an invisible giant hand, crushing Serafina's body, leaving her breathless. She struggled to push through the crowd, everything before her moving in slow motion. She saw people tearing at each other, people roaring, the expressions on their faces identical, utterly devastated. She pushed her way to the counter with all her might, her voice hoarse as she tried to question the staff member before her. But her mouth opened and closed for a long time without a single syllable emerging. Ma'am, can I help you? Are you a relative of one of the victims? The staff member asked loudly. The word victim struck her head like a heavy hammer, making her ears ring and her head spin. Serafina's hand gripped the edge of the counter tightly, her knuckles white from the force. Ethan Miller. I'm Ethan Miller's next of kin. Perhaps afraid the staff member hadn't heard clearly, Serafina repeated herself. I am Ethan Miller's next of kin. Serafina had so many questions for the staff. Had the plane really crashed? Had everyone truly perished? Was Ethan really gone? But when it came to this point, she couldn't say a word, only moving like a puppet controlled by the staff member, answering whatever she was asked, doing whatever she was told. Finally, the staff member handed her a paper. This is Mr. Ethan Miller's death confirmation. Please sign here. A piece of paper with Ethan Miller's black and white photo was presented to Serafina. She widened her eyes, trying hard to read the words on the paper, but no matter how much she rubbed her eyes, she couldn't make out a single word. Serafina frantically grabbed the hand of a person next to her. Excuse me, can you help me read this? What does it say? The person was already filled with anger, but after reading the paper, their anger turned to sorrow. My condolences. It says your husband also died in this plane crash. Instantly, a metallic taste flooded Serafina Shaw's throat. Her tie felt like a python coiling around her windpipe, and static snowed at the edges of her vision. The word died was burning in the depths of her consciousness, ashes falling into her stomach, triggering a chain reaction of spasms. Serafina stumbled backward until she hit a pillar, her body slumping to the floor as if all strength had deserted her. She suddenly heard a whimper, like that of a young animal, escape her own throat. The sound was terrifyingly unfamiliar, a lament borrowed from someone else's chest. Ah, ah. Everything that followed felt like a dream to Serafina. Amidst the announcements, Serafina, along with other dazed individuals, signed papers and collected remains. So-called remains. Just a small amount of ash found by the medical examiner and police at the seat Ethan Miller had occupied after the plane crashed. This small amount of ash was solemnly placed in an urn by the medical examiner. After identification, confirmation, and Serafina's signature, it was solemnly handed over to her. Serafina, like a soulless puppet, numbly carried Ethan's urn and walked out. Along the way, countless staff members, their faces etched with sorrow, offered Serafina their condolences and apologies. But Serafina seemed not to hear them, dragging her leaden feet, step by step, out of the airport. Then, she numbly started the car and drove towards home. When Serafina arrived home, she found a group of people waiting at her doorstep. They were Serafina's closest friends and Julian Vance. Her friends had witnessed Serafina and Ethan's journey from their wedding until now. Although Serafina had stopped loving Ethan later on, he was, nominally, still their brother-in-law. Out of courtesy and respect, they felt they should come to see him off one last time. As for Julian, he had been in the hospital, feigning pain and groaning. But upon learning from the news that Ethan's plane had crashed, an immense joy instantly overwhelmed him. Now that Serafina's grandfather was in a vegetative state, unconscious, and Ethan was dead, it was as if fate itself was helping him. His ambition to marry Serafina was practically a sure thing. Thinking this, Julian turned to look at Serafina, who was getting out of the car. He put on a look of feigned grief and stepped forward, intending to support her. Serafina, my condolences. You still have me. But Serafina, as if not seeing Julian, continued to stumble towards the steps. Behind her, Julian saw his empty, outstretched hand, a flash of unwillingness in his eyes. The next moment, Julian heard exclamations from ahead. Serafina, be careful. Julian quickly looked up and saw Serafina, who was walking up the steps, suddenly weaken at the knees and fall straight down. His face changed, and he hurried to help her up. But Serafina numbly shook her head, her eyes even more vacant. I'm fine, don't worry about me. Seeing her like this, the others looked even more concerned. Someone, unable to bear it, said, Serafina, I know Ethan's death was too sudden, but didn't you stop loving him? Now that he's dead, doesn't it make things easier for you and Julian? Yeah. Others chimed in agreement. Yes, you told us before that your marriage with Ethan was just an arrangement. No feelings involved. Why suffer like this for him? Serafina remained kneeling, head bowed. After a long while, the others heard her murmur. No feelings. How could there be no feelings? She and Ethan. The moment Julian heard no feelings, his eyes lit up. He had almost forgotten about that, because Serafina had ignored him earlier. Yes, Serafina and Ethan had no feelings for each other. Ethan's death must have been too sudden, so Serafina hadn't processed it and had overlooked him. So Julian quickly ran forward, bent down to help her up. Yes, Serafina, you didn't love Ethan. He's dead, so he's dead. Seeing you like this hurts me. It's unclear which of Julian's words triggered Serafina, but she suddenly looked up and violently pushed him to the ground. Get out. Several friends rushed to help Julian up, asking Serafina what was wrong with her. But Serafina drove them all away too. Get out, all of you, get out. Bang! The villa's main door slammed shut. Serafina, clutching Ethan's urn, collapsed to her knees, a wounded, animalistic sob escaping her lips. Ethan! How could she not love Ethan Miller? Whether in her past life or this one, she had loved Ethan so deeply. Yes, Serafina Shaw was also reborn. In her previous life, after dying in the fire holding Ethan's body, she had expected to enter an endless hell. Unexpectedly, when she opened her eyes again, she found herself reborn, right back at the time when she had just married Ethan. Initially, Serafina was ecstatic. She could see Ethan again. Last time, due to her negligence, Ethan had been deceived by his childhood sweetheart, Chloe, ultimately kidnapped and subjected to so much torture. This life, she swore to treat Ethan well, to expose Chloe's true colors. But when Serafina saw the distant, cold look in Ethan's eyes, she suddenly realized with clarity that Ethan hadn't been reborn yet. The current Ethan was still the one who didn't love her, who despised her. Yet Serafina was unwilling to accept it. She had loved Ethan for 2 entire lifetimes. Why wouldn't he even glance back at her? So, on the advice of her closest friends, Serafina forcibly withdrew her love for Ethan, choosing to treat him with the same coldness he showed her. Her goal was simple: to make Ethan give in first, to make him realize how important her love was to him. If Ethan could finally come to his senses, turn back, and choose to love and cherish her, then they could continue to live happily ever after. Conversely, Serafina was willing to let go and allow him to be with Chloe Davis. But plans never keep up with changes. Serafina hadn't expected Ethan to be reborn, just like her. When she saw Ethan joyfully embracing her, sobbing and apologizing, saying he had been blind to hurt her, and then repeatedly promising to treat her well and love her in the future. In that instant, Serafina felt like she had won the lottery, incredibly excited. Soon, however, she calmed down and pushed Ethan away, afraid he'd pull the same trick as before, charming her with sweet talk just to run off with Chloe again. Although Ethan later repeatedly assured her he had repented, no longer loved Chloe, and wanted to love her properly. To prevent being deceived as she was in the past life, Serafina steeled her heart and continued to treat Ethan coldly. She wanted to teach him a lesson. So Serafina discarded all the plans she had made when she was first reborn. Since Ethan was reborn and wanted to compensate her, Serafina decided to give him a chance, to see how far he would go to make it up to her. Thus, Serafina continued to be cruel to Ethan. Perhaps fearing she wasn't being harsh enough, Serafina found a young lover, Julian, to act out a play, hurting him time and time again. Forcing Ethan's mother onto the operating table to donate a liver to Julian, strapping Ethan to an electroshock chair, a drop tower, and even, in the end, to force Ethan to reveal Julian's whereabouts, tying Ethan's parents to the deck of a yacht to be fed to sharks. Watching Ethan's love for her gradually fade, turning into numb despair. It would be a lie to say Serafina wasn't alarmed, but then she thought, didn't Ethan say he loved her very much? How could he not endure this little bit of pain? In her previous life, she had endured far more pain than Ethan was experiencing now, perhaps even 1,000 times more. Moreover, Ethan, out of jealousy, had even framed Julian, causing her grandfather to become a vegetable. So, in the end, Serafina decided to send Ethan abroad to let him cool down properly. When Ethan had calmed down, she would bring him back. If Ethan returned and admitted his mistakes, having learned his lesson, then Serafina would tell him about her own rebirth. They would completely reconcile, put the past behind them, and start a new life together. But Serafina's beautiful plans were thwarted by an unexpected turn of events. The plane Ethan was on crashed, with no survivors. At this thought, Serafina slapped herself hard several times. Why? Why had things turned out this way? She had never intended for Ethan to die. If she had known, she wouldn't have put Ethan on that plane, wouldn't have sent him abroad. If she hadn't done that, would Ethan be standing right in front of her alive and well? It was only at this moment that Serafina Shaw realized she was wrong, terribly wrong. She should have told Ethan she was also reborn when he said he was, when he wanted to make it up to her. There were so many ways Ethan could have compensated her. Why did she choose such an extreme one? Why did she have to find a lover to provoke him? But Serafina's regret came too late. Ethan was dead, not even ashes left. Serafina could no longer hold back and burst into tears. As she cried, a metallic sweetness welled up in her throat, and the next moment, a mouthful of blood sprayed from her lips. In that instant, Serafina's vision went black, and she completely lost consciousness. Serafina had a very long dream. In it, she saw Ethan running towards her, his eyes full of love, pulling her into his embrace. He kissed her hard and said, "Serafina, I love you." Just as Serafina instinctively leaned in to kiss him back, the dream suddenly shattered. Ethan instantly turned to ash in her arms. No matter how hard Serafina tried to grasp, she couldn't catch even a wisp of smoke. "No, don't, Ethan." Serafina woke from the dream with a start, sitting up. She found herself lying on a large bed and 4 drip in her arm. Besides Julian Vance and her assistant, there was only a strange man standing beside her. "Ms. Shaw, please accept my condolences. I am Mr. Ethan Miller's divorce lawyer." The word divorce made Serafina's head snap up to look at him. "What did you say?" Julian, on the other hand, upon hearing divorce, his eyes instantly lit up. Just as Julian was about to say something, the assistant, sensing something amiss, quickly escorted him out. Ethan's divorce lawyer then took out the already processed divorce decree from his briefcase and truthfully informed Serafina of the situation. A month ago, Mr. Miller entrusted me with handling his divorce. He requested to receive nothing and even told us that, no matter what happened, the divorce decree must ultimately be delivered to you. By the way, Ms. Shaw, Mr. Miller also asked me to convey a message to you. He said, what's past is past. Let's go our separate ways and never see each other again. After speaking, the lawyer placed the divorce decree on the nightstand in front of Serafina. Serafina's mind was completely blank. She stared blankly at the divorce papers, the deep red document gleaming coldly on the cabinet in the light. After a long pause, Serafina slowly reached out to take it. The moment her fingers touched the cover, she recoiled as if electrocuted. Her marriage certificate was crimson with gold lettering. This was a congealed, blood clot-like dark red, its edges bearing the serrated imprint of the county clerk's seal. The water glass on the cabinet suddenly trembled. She looked down to see her own hand shaking. The inner pages of the document rustled. The words divorce decree printed in a standard font were searing themselves onto her retinas. This is impossible. How could it be? How could Ethan suddenly have divorced her? Wasn't Ethan reborn? Didn't he say he regretted it? Didn't he say he would treat her well and love her in this life? Why did he suddenly divorce her? For a moment, Serafina even doubted whether Ethan had truly been reborn, whether he had ever said those things. Did Ethan love her or not? Serafina's throat tightened as if she had swallowed a sharp-edged piece of ice. Everywhere it passed was cut, seeping wet blood that spread to her mouth. And when had he given her the divorce papers? Memory suddenly pierced through the chaos. It seemed that day, her assistant had indeed given her a file that included a divorce agreement. At the time, she was preoccupied with Julian and hadn't looked closely. Even later, when Ethan received the signed divorce agreement and looked at her with an expression of relief, she had found it inexplicable. But Serafina hadn't thought much of it. Now it all dawned on her. So, he had wanted to divorce her even back then? The document slapped onto the nightstand with a thwack, startling the lawyer beside her. Serafina Shaw saw her own pale face reflected in the opposite floor-to-ceiling window. Behind her, the walk-in closet was half empty. His favorite white shirts were gone, only hangers swaying gently in the night breeze. A sudden warmth spread from her fingertips. She flipped to the inner page, to the registration date, May 23 RD. It was the day of Ethan Miller's plane crash. That day, Serafina had personally handed Ethan the plane ticket, telling him she was sending him abroad to cool down. The very day Ethan boarded the plane, the county clerk's seal had fallen on their divorce decree. Both Ethan the man and her marriage to Ethan had utterly and completely left her. Serafina's retinas began to whiten, the divorce decree twisting in her vision into a red-hot iron block. A sharp pain shot through her palm. She looked down to realize she was clutching the document so tightly, just like in their previous life when she had desperately clutched Ethan's hand, begging him not to go to Chloe Davis. A metallic taste rose in Serafina's throat, another smear of blood escaping her lips. Her vision began to blacken in waves. A sharp ringing suddenly erupted in the darkness, as if a tsunami were crashing through her eardrums. The date stamped on the document echoed relentlessly in her ear canal. May 23rd, 2025, the 23rd. She had lost Ethan Miller once again. 3 days later, at the cemetery. In the pouring rain, a phalanx of black umbrellas formed a moving cage. The divorce decree in Serafina's pocket was soaked through, the signatures of the two people on the paper dissolving and bleeding in the rain. Serafina stared blankly at Ethan's photo on the tombstone, the scenes from moments ago replaying endlessly in her mind. She had carried Ethan's urn from the black hearse, walked along the winding mountain path to the gravesite, then knelt on both knees, slowly placing Ethan's urn inside, then personally cupping handfuls of earth, slowly covering Ethan's urn. Finally, she had risen and stood aside, watching as workers sealed him and Ethan's urn off completely with cement. Serafina slowly squatted down, reaching out to wipe Ethan's tombstone, but her fingertips passed through the damp emptiness, back to the year she was 18. That year, Serafina first saw Ethan on campus. Just one look, and her eyes could see no one else. From then on, she was deeply mired in a bitter, secret love. She wrote love poems for Ethan, played the piano for him as he passed by the sunlit piano room, and deliberately walked past the basketball court when Ethan was there with friends. Unfortunately, Ethan's eyes never held her, only Chloe Davis. It would be a lie to say she wasn't disappointed, but Serafina didn't give up because of it. Later, the Shaw and Miller families arranged a marriage, and she married the man she loved. Serafina swore to desperately treat Ethan well, but Ethan's eyes only held Chloe. She tried, she struggled, but in the end, it led to Ethan's elopement and their deaths in a fire. In this life, both reborn, they could have understood each other, started a new, happy life together. Yet, because of her own selfish thoughts, she had pushed Ethan to the brink step by step, ultimately causing his death. The light in Serafina's eyes gradually dimmed, turning into a dead stillness. In her previous life, she had been reborn after dying with Ethan. So this time, if she died in front of Ethan's tombstone, could she be reborn again? Could she then win Ethan back? Thinking this, Serafina, like a string puppet, stiffly took a knife from her pocket, then slowly moved it towards her heart. Just as she was about to plunge the knife into her heart, a shrill ringing suddenly interrupted her. Mr. Shaw Sr. is awake. The butler's excited voice came from the other end of the phone. With a clatter, the knife in Serafina Shaw's hand fell to the ground. Serafina, forgetting everything else, rushed to the hospital. She found her grandfather's room swarming with doctors. A miracle. It's truly a miracle, the doctors exclaimed as they examined Arthur Shaw Sr. After confirming he was all right, they left the room to Serafina and her grandfather. The old man stared at her blankly for a second, then asked, "Where's Ethan?" Serafina paused, a wave of grief welling up in her eyes. Her grandfather was old and couldn't take any more shocks. Thinking this, Serafina clenched her fists, struggling to steady her emotions as she told him the truth, only concealing the fact of Ethan's death. Last time, because he tried to kill you, I sent him abroad. When he admits his mistake, I'll bring him back. Hearing this, her grandfather struggled to sit up in bed. Absolute nonsense. How could Ethan possibly try to harm me? It was clearly that young lover of yours. Agitated, her grandfather coughed a few times. Serafina, alarmed, quickly patted his back, her eyes wide with shock. What are you saying? How was that possible? She knew Julian Vance's character. Julian was so gentle, he wouldn't even step on an insect. How could he possibly try to kill her grandfather? Her grandfather was furious. If you don't believe me, go check the security footage. Security footage? Serafina remembered. When her grandfather had the incident, she had indeed intended to check the footage, but Julian had tearfully clung to her sleeve, insisting it wasn't him. At that time, Ethan already had many prior offenses, so Serafina had unhesitatingly chosen to believe Julian. Now, her grandfather was telling her to check the footage again. Serafina felt it was pointless. Even if she checked, so what? The perpetrator was still Ethan. But now that Ethan was gone, she didn't want to pursue it further. Yet, her grandfather remained insistent. Even if you favor Julian, you have to give Ethan the truth. If you don't check, I'll go myself. Seeing her grandfather's persistence, Serafina quickly stopped him and personally returned to the villa to retrieve the security footage. However, the butler informed her that the security system had malfunctioned on the day of her grandfather's incident. Serafina frowned, feeling that something was amiss. Just then, a maid approached, cautiously saying, "Ms. Shaw, I have a video." The maid had originally gone to close the window in the old master's room, but had unexpectedly witnessed the horrifying scene. She had quickly hidden in the closet and secretly recorded it. She hadn't dared to show it earlier, partly because she feared Serafina wouldn't believe her, and partly because she was afraid of offending Julian. Now, with the old master's backing, the maid dared to bring it out. Serafina quickly took the maid's phone and played the video. Within moments, the heart rate monitor on her smartwatch breached 120. In the video, after her grandfather finished talking with Ethan and was about to go to bed, just moments after he closed his eyes, a man in a white shirt quietly entered. The diamond ring glittering on his finger was the one-of-a-kind piece Serafina had snagged for Julian at auction the day before the family dinner. The next moment, the man turned, revealing Julian's face. Unlike the docile demeanor he showed Serafina, Julian's face was now dark and vicious. He strode forward, grabbed a pillow from the side, and violently smothered her grandfather's face. He even cursed viciously. "You old bastard, daring to stop me from marrying Serafina Shaw. You're fucking looking for death, aren't you?" The moment those crude, malicious words spewed from Julian's mouth, Serafina's smartwatch vibrated with a high-frequency warning. The blood pressure curve on the watch face climbed wildly, much like the piercing wail of the ambulance siren that day. "Butler, call Julian Vance here." Serafina heard her own icy voice. "And call the police." When Julian Vance pushed open the door, Serafina Shaw was sitting on the sofa with her back to the entrance. The television in front of her was replaying the video of Julian attempting to murder her grandfather, and on the coffee table before the TV lay a spread of evidence detailing Julian's schemes against Ethan Miller. Serafina had ordered her assistant to investigate all this after learning Julian was the one who tried to kill her grandfather. Serafina knew Julian was malicious, but she hadn't expected him to be this depraved. The thought that she had repeatedly hurt Ethan for such a man sent another sharp pain through Serafina's heart. The heart monitor on her wrist began to blare an urgent alarm again. But Serafina, as if deaf to it, remained seated on the sofa, as still as a statue, awaiting Julian's arrival. Before pushing open the villa door, Julian's heart was pounding with excitement. Ever since Ethan's death, Serafina had informed him their contract was over and had him kicked out of the villa. Serafina's notification had come so suddenly, leaving Julian completely unprepared. He had grown accustomed to a life of luxury. Returning to a mundane existence was nothing short of a nightmare. However, Julian hadn't taken it to heart. He merely assumed Serafina was overwhelmed by grief from losing Ethan and had temporarily lost her mind. Besides, over the past few months, Serafina had truly doted on him, hurting Ethan for his sake numerous times. He couldn't believe Serafina would genuinely cast him aside. Perhaps, after some time, Serafina would welcome him back to the villa. Sure enough, not long after, the villa's butler came to his door specifically to bring him back. In that instant, Julian was ecstatic. He thought Serafina had moved on, had re-evaluated their relationship, and confirmed she had genuinely fallen in love with him. This time, she was bringing him back to give him a new status. But when Julian pushed open the villa door, what awaited him was not a surprise, but a nightmare. Explain. Serafina didn't look at Julian, merely glancing up at the television, her voice colder than the late autumn air. Julian's face instantly drained of color, from rosy to deathly pale. He saw his own breath fog in the air, congealing into the shape of an arrow. Serafina, these are all fakes. Believe me, how could I possibly do these things? Even with all the evidence and witnesses, Julian stubbornly denied everything, because he knew, with chilling certainty, that admitting it meant a dead end. Thinking this, Julian resorted to his most frequently used tactic with Serafina. His eyes reddened as he knelt beside her, attempting to take her hand with the same pitiable expression he always used. Serafina. The next moment, the documents in Serafina's hand slapped him across the face. The sharp edges of the paper cut Julian's cheek, drawing beads of blood. The sudden impact sent Julian sprawling to the floor. Serafina suddenly laughed. She rose, stepping over the scattered papers towards him, her custom-made leather shoes crushing the box of pastries he had specially brought. Julian Vance, you're just a kept man. How could you be so audacious? No, you're not even a kept man. Just an actor. Lightning suddenly flashed outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Julian saw his reflection in the glass melting away. The always immaculate version of himself was now disheveled and pathetic amidst the storm of evidence. Serafina slowly squatted down in front of Julian, her hand shooting out to grip his neck, as if to suffocate him. The moment Serafina's hand closed around Julian's neck, he smelled the Creta Ventus on her. It was Julian's favorite scent. Now, however, it felt like the stench of a demon from hell. No, I really didn't. Julian remained obstinate, struggling to prop himself up and grab Serafina's pant leg. I've always tried my best to follow your instructions. How could I possibly do these things? Back then, Julian Vance was just an ordinary student at an ordinary university, and a wealthy heiress like Serafina Shaw was someone he could only ever see on television. So when Serafina actually appeared before him, asking him to act in a charade, Julian felt like he had won the grand lottery. He nodded without hesitation, even though everyone warned him, saying Serafina was just playing with him, that if he got emotionally invested and couldn't move on, he would be devastated. Julian persisted, because he had liked Serafina for a very, very long time. From the first moment he saw Serafina on television, Julian had sworn that if he ever married, it would only be to Serafina. Everyone said Julian was dreaming. So when Julian finally got a chance to get close to Serafina, he naturally seized it tightly. Serafina's request was simple. She wanted Julian to pretend to be her lover, to flaunt their affection in front of Ethan Miller. Initially, Julian obediently played along. But as Serafina treated him better and better, even showing him more affection than she showed Ethan, Julian's ambitions grew. He no longer wanted to be a disposable lover. He wanted to be her husband, the son-in-law of the Shaw family. At first, Julian only dared to commit minor acts of framing Ethan, or to make jokes. But when he found Serafina indifferent, Julian's courage gradually grew. He began to frame Ethan in various ways, even attempting to cause the death of Serafina's grandfather. Truthfully, Julian's methods weren't particularly sophisticated, but somehow Serafina always trusted him. So Julian never worried about his actions being exposed, especially since the only witness, her grandfather, was now in a vegetative state. Therefore, Julian was completely unprepared for the possibility of his deeds coming to light. Caught off guard, Julian had no excuse, only able to deny everything repeatedly. He thought that if he just kept denying it, Serafina would eventually let the matter drop. Unfortunately for him, Serafina wasn't stupid. Previously, she had wanted to see how far Ethan, who loved her, would go for her. So, as long as Julian's actions didn't harm Ethan, she mostly ignored them. She never expected her indulgence to inflate Julian's ego. And it just so happened that during that time, Ethan had begun to grow numb and apathetic towards her, offering no denials. Thus, an enraged Serafina never bothered to thoroughly investigate the truth. But now, she would absolutely not let Julian go. She stood up again, pronouncing Julian's final fate like a harbinger of death. Since you enjoy framing others so much, then you can spend your time in prison. I'll make sure someone takes good care of you. The words "takes good care" were even deliberately emphasized by Serafina. Julian's face instantly contorted in terror. His hand, clutching Serafina's pant leg, fell limply. Amidst Julian's screams and pleas, police sirens pierced through the storm, and countless officers swarmed in. "No, don't. I only did this because I love you, Serafina. You can't do this to me." Julian stared at her silhouetted profile, wailing. He suddenly remembered a party on a certain night. Under the same crystal chandeliers, the woman had cupped his face and said, "Julian, I will love you for a lifetime." And now, she was telling the police officer before her, "The evidence is all on this table." As the cold handcuffs closed around Julian's wrists, he finally resigned himself to his fate, bowing his head and murmuring, "Serafina, in these past few months, did you truly never love me at all?" An officer dragged Julian backward, his shoes leaving deep marks on the carpet. Not even a little bit. The wind and rain slammed his final words against the villa's tightly shut door. Serafina never looked back. Overnight, the city of New York was in turmoil. No one had expected Serafina Shaw, who one moment seemed madly in love with Julian Vance, to suddenly turn on him the next. Not only did she personally send him to prison, but she also leaked everything he had done to the press. Even Ethan Miller, far away in Paris, saw the news. In a cafe under a sycamore tree on a Parisian street, Ethan was sitting by an open window, savoring his rose cardamom latte. When he first learned that the flight he was supposed to be on had crashed, Ethan had been immensely grateful. Thank goodness he hadn't boarded that plane. If he had truly been on that flight, he couldn't imagine the grief his parents and relatives would have endured. But he hadn't spared a thought for Serafina's reaction. In Ethan's mind, the reborn Serafina of this life didn't love him at all. His death wouldn't affect her in the slightest. She wouldn't have repeatedly denied being reborn when he, sensing her strangeness, had tested her. Back then, Ethan truly didn't understand why she suddenly stopped loving him, as if she had become a different person. It wasn't until later, after Ethan arrived in Paris and happened to chat with new friends about his past, that he learned the answer from them. Perhaps it was hatred. No one, after being repeatedly hurt and even nearly killed by their most beloved, would fall in love with them again. Let alone others, even Ethan himself, after being hurt so many times by Serafina in this reborn life, had completely given up on her. So, after he faked his death, Ethan hadn't bothered to update his information with the airline. After all, there was no one in America who cared about him now. Whether he was dead or alive didn't matter. Even if Serafina learned of his death, she probably wouldn't care. After all, the person she loved now was Julian, not him. Until today, when Ethan saw the news. The articles were filled with elegies Serafina had written for him, her ex-husband, across various platforms. Every word, every sentence, dripped with Serafina's profound love for him. The phone screen glowed coldly in the morning mist. Those words were like a rusty knife, prying open the memory box he had long since welded shut. A long time ago, when Serafina loved him most, she would also write him a love letter every day. The words and sentences within also revealed deep affection. He never thought he would still be affected by these words now. Only it was no longer a feeling of being touched, but rather a sense of irony. Ethan genuinely couldn't understand Serafina's intentions now. Didn't she not love him? Otherwise, why deny she was also reborn, push him away time and again, and follow Julian in hurting him repeatedly? Now that Ethan was dead, shouldn't she be happy? Why put on this act of regret? Was she regretting sending him onto the plane that killed him? Or had she, after his death, suddenly come to her senses and realized she still loved him? Regardless of how Serafina regretted it or whatever her attitude was, it was all irrelevant to Ethan now. After all, he had long since given up on Serafina, and in her world, he was already a dead man. The best state for them now was to have no further contact. Thinking this, Ethan's long fingers continued to scroll down the screen. Then he saw another piece of news that astonished him. Julian Vance, officially incarcerated today for assault and attempted murder. The punctuation pricked his eyeballs. The porcelain spoon in Ethan's hand clinked against the cup, a small sound. Only then did he realize he was trembling. Not with pleasure, not with sorrow, but because the belated truth had suddenly torn open a scabbed over wound, revealing the unhealed, rotten flesh beneath. Memories rewound like a tape, those past incidents of being framed by Julian replaying one by one in Ethan's mind, then slowly dissipating. He closed his eyes, then shifted his gaze back to his phone, exiting the news interface and turning off the screen. Along with it, he nonchalantly covered up those torn open, scabbed wounds again. After all, from the moment he faked his death, whatever happened with Serafina and Julian was no longer his concern. He couldn't keep following their news. He needed to focus entirely on his own life. Ethan placed his phone aside and picked up the now cold coffee from the table, downing it in one gulp. Just then, his phone vibrated again. It was a calendar reminder from an app. Today was the Miller family dinner. Ethan pushed the empty coffee cup away. As he stood up, the movement of his coat stirred the air, causing the last sycamore leaf by the window to fall. His reflection in the glass curtain wall moved with composure into the sunlight. As the late autumn twilight wrapped the Miller estate in a cloak of golden silk, Ethan's car pulled up to the main gate. Ethan stooped to get out, one hand carrying a pre-selected gift, the other casually tossing the keys to a nearby bodyguard. No need to park it in the garage. I'll be heading back to my own place later tonight. The bodyguard readily agreed and drove the car away. Ethan carried the gift up the steps and pushed open the red-lacquered, carved wooden door. A gust of cold air, tinged with the scent of pine, swirled in with him. The crystal chandelier already bathed the dining room in brilliant light. Ethan's aunt, the current matriarch of the Miller family, was just placing the final dish, a lavish seafood bisque, on the table. Hearing Ethan's footsteps, she turned with a smile, the pearls at her ears reflecting the firelight from the hearth. Perfect timing. Come on in, dinner's ready. Ethan acknowledged her and handed the gift to a nearby servant before heading off to wash his hands. When Ethan returned, his mother, Carol, was waiting for him, emerging from the kitchen with a steaming bowl of ginger tea. It's so cold out, and you're dressed so thinly. Aren't you afraid of catching a cold? Carol's voice was laced with concern, and she only relented after watching Ethan finish the entire bowl. His aunt watched the mother and son with an amused smile, her eyes agreeing with Carol's sentiment. Put on your overcoat later, don't catch a chill. Ethan nodded repeatedly, and only then did the two women let him be. As the tableware was being laid out on the round table, Grandpa Miller appeared, leaning on a rosewood cane topped with a dragon's head. Let's begin, the old man announced, and only then did everyone pick up their utensils. Due to the Miller family's strict etiquette, the only sounds during the meal were the faint clinking of cutlery. Otherwise, there was not a whisper of other noise. Ethan, especially because of his parents' past actions, dared not utter an extra word in front of Grandpa Miller. After the meal, Ethan's father, Robert, and his mother were summoned to Grandpa Miller's study. His aunt, noticing Ethan's worried expression, gently patted his hand and led him to a nearby sofa. Don't worry, Grandpa won't do anything to your parents. After all, they are his son and daughter-in-law. Hearing this, the worry in Ethan's eyes receded, replaced by a silent sigh. A mandatory event at every visit to the old estate was Grandpa scolding Ethan's parents. Although Ethan had repeatedly explained to his grandfather that his marital problems were largely his own fault and not his parents', Grandpa Miller insisted it was their fault. In reality, given the Miller family's influence, Ethan hadn't needed to marry into the Shaw family. It was only due to his parents' insistence that Ethan had married Serafina. Grandpa Miller had been furious upon hearing this. He supported Ethan's freedom to choose his own partner and had even approved of him marrying Chloe Davis. Upon learning of Ethan's arranged marriage, he had flown directly to America to reprimand Ethan's parents, saying that even if the Miller family fell on hard times, they wouldn't need to resort to a marriage alliance with a family like the Shaws. His parents, however, were extremely stubborn, insisting on the marriage with Serafina. Neither side could convince the other. Grandpa wanted to take Ethan away, but Ethan's parents adamantly refused to let him go, as only they knew the difference between Serafina and Chloe at that time. Since then, Grandpa had returned to Paris and had nothing more to do with their branch of the family. Later, their branch of the family suffered at Serafina's hands and was harmed. Eventually, the three of them came to Paris, and only after Ethan and his parents admitted their mistakes did Grandpa reconcile with them. Upon hearing about how Ethan was variously harmed by Serafina in America, Grandpa had wanted to seek revenge for Ethan. But Ethan, remembering the events of his past life, thought that the suffering he endured in this life could be considered repayment to Serafina. Ethan and Serafina were now even. Neither owed the other anything. So, at Ethan's persuasion, Grandpa finally gave up on revenge, merely warning them not to have any further dealings with Serafina. At every family dinner, Grandpa would bring up this matter to remind Ethan's parents to be vigilant. He said Ethan could choose not to marry again in the future, but he would not allow Ethan to be hurt again. Ethan's parents knew they were in the wrong, so they always obediently admitted their mistakes whenever Grandpa reprimanded them. Ethan also felt incredibly guilty, but his parents said it was what they deserved. It was all their fault for not making things clear beforehand, leading to such a long-standing misunderstanding. That evening, due to the earnest persuasion of his grandfather, aunt, and uncle, Ethan's family stayed at the old estate. That evening, Carol Miller knocked on Ethan's door. She had also seen the news from America and asked Ethan what his thoughts were. Ethan stated bluntly that there was no possibility between him and Serafina Shaw. He was already dead in America. It was better to let this misunderstanding continue. This would prevent Serafina from pestering him again if she ever found out he was alive. His mother nodded repeatedly, saying that was for the best. After mother and son chatted for a while, Carol left, telling Ethan to rest early. For the next few days, Ethan's family stayed at the old estate. His days were leisurely, spent either playing chess with his grandfather or chatting with his aunt and mother. Until one day, an unexpected visitor arrived. It was the butler from Serafina Shaw's grandfather's household. Having suffered multiple blows, Serafina had fallen ill and was bedridden. All major and minor family affairs were temporarily managed by Serafina's grandfather. And the first thing her grandfather did was to send his butler to Paris with lavish gifts to apologize to the Miller family. After all, Ethan had died because of Serafina. They were the party at fault. Serafina's grandfather's message was that he didn't seek the Miller family's forgiveness, only that they, for his sake, would not blame Serafina, as she had already received her due retribution. The arrival of the Shaw family representative was so abrupt that Ethan didn't react for a moment. It was his aunt who reacted first, pushing Ethan and his parents into the study, instructing them not to come down no matter what happened downstairs. After his aunt went downstairs, the butler stood by the sofa, holding the valuable gifts, bowing deeply in apology to Grandpa Miller, who was seated on the sofa. He relayed old Mr. Shaw's words verbatim. Grandpa Miller listened without saying a word, not even looking at the butler. The two remained in a standoff. Ethan's aunt, her expression stern, walked over. Mr. Shaw's butler, since you know our Miller family does not welcome you, why did you bother coming all this way? Aren't you just asking for trouble? The Shaw butler's face grew even more apologetic. Since they were in the wrong, he couldn't refute her, only able to apologize repeatedly. But Ethan's aunt couldn't listen anymore, simply waving her hand. If apologies were useful, will my nephew still be alive? Go back and tell the Shaw family that our two families need not have any further dealings. Otherwise, you know what the Miller family is capable of. The Shaw butler's face suddenly turned pale. The remaining words stuck in his throat, unable to come out. Ethan's aunt didn't look at him again, merely helping Grandpa Miller up and towards the stairs, while instructing their own butler to see the guest out. This small interlude did not significantly affect Ethan, but it did have a certain impact on Serafina and her family back in America. After the Shaw butler relayed Ethan's aunt's words verbatim, both Serafina and her grandfather looked rather pale. Especially Serafina, whose heart was in turmoil. If not for her current physical condition, she would have flown directly to Paris and knelt before the Miller family. She knew the Millers hated her, but she hadn't expected them to hate her to this extent, to cut off all contact. They wouldn't even come back to pay respects to Ethan. Serafina could understand Ethan's parents not returning. Seeing the tombstone would only deepen their grief. This was also something Ethan wouldn't have wanted, but Grandpa Miller had doted on his grandson so much. Even if his health prevented long-distance travel, he could have sent someone back to pay respects to Ethan. Now that he too was unwilling to return, it seemed somewhat strange. But Serafina couldn't quite pinpoint what was odd. Just then, old Mr. Shaw, who had been silent for a long time, finally spoke. He sighed deeply and looked at Serafina. When you're feeling better, you should make a trip to Paris yourself. Even if they don't see you, you can kowtow outside and admit your mistake. After all, you were in the wrong in this matter. Old Mr. Shaw's eyes were full of regret as he said this. If he had known back then that his granddaughter and Ethan would end up like this, he would never have allowed them to marry. Serafina nodded. After helping her grandfather back to his room, she went downstairs again. Just then, her assistant approached. CEO Shaw, Julian Vance says he wants to see you. The name Julian Vance made Serafina pause for a long moment before she registered who it was. Since sending Julian to prison a month ago, she had quickly forgotten his existence. Now, hearing that Julian wanted to see her, Serafina instinctively wanted to refuse. Don't mention his affairs to me again. Whether he lives or dies is no concern of mine. The assistant looked troubled, but Julian Vance said what he has to say is related to Mr. Miller. Hearing Ethan's name, Serafina, who was about to walk out, suddenly stopped. She remained silent for a long while before speaking again. Get the car. We're going to the prison. In the prison visitation room, Serafina Shaw stared through the thick glass at Julian Vance, who was clad in an orange jumpsuit, his face gaunt and sallow. She almost didn't recognize him. In Serafina's memory, Julian always maintained his best appearance in front of her to curry favor. She hadn't expected the Julian before her to have become like this. Serafina had no further thoughts on the matter and directly asked Julian what he wanted to tell her. In his month-plus in prison, Julian had learned many rules and no longer dared to cause trouble. He got straight to the point. Ethan Miller is still alive. The teacup shattered on the tile floor, and in that instant, Serafina heard the sound of ice cracking within her bones. Julian's lips were still moving, but the syllables transformed into sharp needles piercing her temples. Her hand gripping the receiver tightened so hard her knuckles turned white. The glass window in front of her reflected her distorted face, like a pale plaster statue, suddenly infused with a soul. Ethan Miller's urn was brought back from the airport by me personally. The death certificate was also confirmed and signed by me. How dare you say he's still alive? Serafina sneered, but her voice was trembling. Compared to Serafina's shock, Julian appeared remarkably calm. I have a friend who works at the airport. Last time he visited me in prison, he told me that on the day of Ethan Miller's plane crash, someone with the exact same name as Ethan Miller, and even an identical appearance, bought a ticket, no, 3 tickets, to Paris. Last night, with the prison guard's permission, Julian had taken out the papers his friend had photographed and printed, and now placed them in front of Serafina. On the paper, a face identical to Ethan Miller's appeared starkly before Serafina, making her pupils contract sharply. She couldn't be mistaken. Serafina would not be mistaken. She had been Ethan Miller's wife for 2 lifetimes. She knew his appearance better than anyone. It was him. It was Ethan Miller. Serafina could no longer sit still. She shot up and rushed out of the prison. While starting her car and speeding towards the airport, she called her assistant. Book me a flight to Paris right now, immediately. She had to see Ethan, find Ethan, ask Ethan why he faked his death. He loved her so much. Why didn't he come back to her? She had to tell Ethan all the longing, love, and regret she had felt these past days. She had to win Ethan back, remarry him, and start over with him. The plane cut through the clouds and finally landed at an airport in Paris. At this time, a fine drizzle was falling in Paris. Serafina, holding an umbrella, walked briskly through the streets and alleys. Originally, Serafina had intended to go directly to find Ethan, but just after landing, she received a call from her grandfather. Her grandfather, unaware that Ethan was still alive, thought Serafina was going to the Miller family to apologize and specifically reminded her to prepare some gifts. Serafina thought about it. Her grandfather's words made sense. She had hurt Ethan so many times. To go see him so abruptly, without any gesture of goodwill, would be inappropriate. So Serafina turned around mid-journey, got out of the car, and went to a Parisian shopping street to buy Ethan a gift. As Serafina emerged from a luxury boutique, carrying a shopping bag with a high-end brand logo, the frame of her umbrella suddenly groaned under a strong gust of wind, threatening to break. That figure was about 10 meters away, under a sycamore tree, closing an umbrella. His collarbone-length hair, darkened by the rain, shone. The hem of his gray overcoat swept over the water-filled cracks in the pavement, identical to the one she had last seen him wearing. The shopping bag suddenly dropped from Serafina's hand. The expensive perfume inside spilled, its pungent fragrance quickly dispersing. It dredged up her distant memories. Serafina felt as if she were back 3 months ago, in the airport filled with a sorrowful atmosphere, screams, cries, and the mournful wail that escaped her chest when she held Ethan's urn. And now, the curve of that turning figure, even the shape of his protruding wrist bone, was rendered with stark clarity in the rain. Ethan! The screech of brakes tore through the curtain of rain. Serafina Shaw stumbled back 2 steps, her umbrella rolling into the traffic, where it was crushed into a twisted skeleton. Icy rain streamed down her jaw and into the collar of her shirt. That sliver of gray coat was disappearing into a subway entrance across the street. Serafina shoved past a pedestrian holding a hot coffee. The blue light of an electronic screen exploded in her pupils, an escalator carrying countless blurred faces surging toward her. Serafina frantically looked left and right, the light in her eyes gradually dimming. Just as she was about to give up, a cluster of white light suddenly appeared at the end of the escalator. A man's pale fingers were resting on a black umbrella handle, instantly reigniting the darkness in Serafina's eyes. "Excuse me. Make way." A worker carrying goods brushed past her shoulder, a woman with a child squeezed by. Serafina fought her way out of the crowd and finally saw Ethan Miller's face clearly. The halo of the lights flowed over his fallen bangs, his eyes still as bright as stars. The wind stirred up by a passing train lifted the hem of her coat. As the station announcement sounded, the man lifted his foot and stepped into the subway car. Serafina instinctively tried to follow, but the next moment, the train emitted a closing door warning, and then the door shut firmly in her face. The subway roared past Serafina, taking all her thoughts with it. Now, she was like a statue, standing silently in place, not returning to her senses for a long time. But Serafina's heart felt like barren land suddenly sprouting vibrant, blooming flowers. She once again felt her heart, which had been dead for so long, finally beat with life again. Although she hadn't caught up to Ethan, her heart was incredibly excited. If before going abroad she still held doubts about Julian Vance's words, now Serafina had to admit their truthfulness. Ethan was alive. Ethan Miller was actually still alive. Ethan Miller was truly, unbelievably still alive. He hadn't died. Serafina quickly rushed out of the subway, jumped into a car parked by the roadside, and told the driver, "To the Miller estate, quickly." Meanwhile, on the subway, Ethan Miller's face was pale, his hands tightly clenched. He had heard it. He had just heard a very familiar voice. That voice had appeared in his past life when he committed suicide, and also this time when he had his car accident. On many occasions when he was in danger, Ethan had heard it. But Ethan didn't want to hear Serafina's voice again at this time. After all, it was completely over between them, and he had no desire to see Serafina again. Ethan didn't know where Serafina had learned he was still alive, but Serafina's appearance was a bad thing for Ethan. Thinking this, Ethan quickly called his aunt at the old estate. "Aunt, Serafina has found me. She knows I'm alive." Ethan had just gone out to meet a friend, but he hadn't expected to be seen by Serafina. If he had known, he would have stayed obediently at the old estate. That short sentence made his aunt's breath catch on the other end of the line. Then his aunt spoke. "Don't worry, with me here, I won't let Serafina find you." Ethan hummed in agreement and continued. "Then I won't be back for the next few days. Please tell my parents and grandfather for me." Since Ethan had now been exposed, he shouldn't stay in Paris any longer. His aunt told him to be careful and then hung up. After Ethan got off the subway, he directly hailed a cab to the airport. "Hello, I'd like to buy a ticket to the United States." Soon, Ethan was holding his purchase ticket and heading to the departure lounge. Meanwhile, Serafina, after getting out of the car, hurried towards the Miller estate. The Miller family treated Serafina's visit with the same attitude as they had treated the Shaw butler's previous visit. "Serafina Shaw, even if you're going to lie, at least make it somewhat believable. You keep saying Ethan Miller is alive, that you personally saw him in a Paris subway station. But where's the proof? Where's the proof?" Ethan's aunt sipped her tea, her tone full of mockery. Serafina's expression changed slightly. Only then did she remember that in her haste, she had forgotten to take a photo. But luckily, she had the photo someone else had sent her. Whether you believe it or not, Ethan Miller is alive. That is the truth. With that, Serafina Shaw handed the photo Julian Vance had given her to Ethan Miller's aunt. In the photo, Ethan and his parents were sitting in a corner of the departure lounge. The early morning sunlight streamed in, washing over Ethan's face and making him look impossibly handsome. And on either side of Ethan, his parents were talking and laughing with him. But Ethan's aunt remained unmoved. Ms. Shaw, I don't know why you insist on saying Ethan Miller is still alive, but the person in that photo is not Ethan. Besides, didn't you say you don't love him? The word Serafina wanted to say all got stuck in her throat. How could she explain? Could she say that both she and Ethan were reborn? People would think she was crazy. After much deliberation, Serafina finally said, Ethan and I have some misunderstandings, but please believe me, I do love Ethan. Ethan's aunt sneered. If you truly loved Ethan, why would you do so many things to hurt him? Search your conscience. Were those things you did really acts of love? No, it's not like that. At first, I thought Ethan didn't love me, so I treated him that way. Later, I found out Ethan did love me, and I wanted to compensate him, but he first. Serafina Shaw, if Ethan Miller truly didn't love you, he wouldn't have chosen to marry you. After you started keeping a lover, we once called Ethan, telling him to divorce you and return to Paris. But Ethan refused. He said he wasn't willing to give up on you just like that. He wanted to give you a few more chances. Unfortunately, you didn't seize the opportunities Ethan gave you. Now that he's dead, you shouldn't keep dwelling in the past, nor continue to torture yourself, nor come harassing our Miller family. If you truly miss Ethan, go to his grave and see him, instead of coming to the Miller estate, pestering us with absurd claims that Ethan is still alive. After speaking, Ethan's aunt didn't look at her again, turned, closed the door, and walked into the estate. Wait! Serafina instinctively tried to follow, but the firmly closed gate blocked her. She stared at that retreating figure for a long time, her hands, hanging by her sides, gradually clenching. No, she couldn't be mistaken. That was Ethan. She didn't know why Ethan was unwilling to see her, why he let his family continue to lie to her. But it didn't matter. Serafina could wait. She believed that if she waited long enough, Ethan would eventually appear and see her. Just like a long time ago at the high school basketball court, she had waited day after day. After a whole month, Ethan had been dragged to the basketball court by his roommate. For the next few days, Serafina stayed outside the Miller estate, waiting for Ethan to appear. She waited from sunset to sunrise, from bright sunshine to cold, rainy nights. She waited outside day after day, the light in her eyes gradually dimming. Just when Serafina thought she wouldn't see Ethan, a familiar figure suddenly appeared before her again. Ethan! An excited light burst from Serafina's eyes. She pushed open the car door and ran towards that familiar figure, grabbing his hand and pulling him into a tight embrace. Serafina trembled as she spoke. Ethan, I finally found you. Do you know how much I've missed you these past few months? I missed you so much I was going crazy. I thought you were really dead. Thank goodness you're okay. Serafina had so much she wanted to say to Ethan, but in the end, she could only manage. I missed you so much. But the Ethan in Serafina's arms suddenly looked up, puzzled, and said, Who are you? Serafina looked at the Ethan before her face full of panic. Ethan, it's me, Serafina Shaw. Serafina, your wife. The man before her had no patience to listen to Serafina's explanation. He shoved her away. Are you crazy? Grabbing people and yelling nonsense. Just then, the Miller family's butler hurried out, bowing respectfully to the man. Young master, you're back. The man looked at the butler, displeased. What are you people doing? You don't even drive away someone like this? She scared me, you know. The butler's expression changed. He quickly shielded the man and looked sternly at Serafina Shaw. Ms. Shaw, please leave immediately, or I'll have to call security. But Serafina, as if she hadn't heard, frantically tried to grab the hand of the man behind the butler. Ethan, it's me. Don't you really recognize me? Before the young man could speak, the butler said, Ms. Shaw, you've mistaken him. He is not Ethan. He is the eldest son of the main family, Mr. Evan Miller. This sentence struck Serafina's head like a heavy hammer, making it throb and ring. What did you say? The butler looked at Serafina's unknowing expression and sighed deeply. Young Master Evan and Ethan are cousins. They look so much alike that outsiders often mistake them for twins. As for you saying you saw someone escorting Ethan's parents out of the country at the airport, that person was also young Master Evan. After you sent Ethan abroad, he was worried his parents would have no one to look after them, so he specifically asked young Master Evan, who happened to be in the country, to pick them up. Even if you are overcome with grief from losing Ethan, you shouldn't randomly identify people. No, it's not true. He is Ethan Miller. He has a scar on his wrist from when he saved me. Serafina still didn't believe the butler's explanation. She shoved the butler aside and tried to grab the man's hand, intending to roll up his sleeve and show the evidence. Slap. A crisp slap met Serafina's hand. Evan Miller pointed at her nose and cursed. Are you sick in head? If you can't recognize people, go see a doctor. Don't harass me here. Butler, what are you standing there for? Hurry up and call people to get rid of her. As he spoke, a group of bodyguards rushed out to remove Serafina. She struggled desperately, her eyes full of unwillingness. Ethan! Ethan! Evan Miller watched coldly as Serafina was dragged further and further away by the bodyguards. Only then did he take out his phone and call Ethan Miller. Hearing that Serafina had been driven away, Ethan thanked Evan. I really appreciate your help with today's matter. Previously, Ethan had thought that after his aunt's persuasion, Serafina would believe he was truly dead and would stop looking for him. But he hadn't expected Serafina to be so persistent, waiting outside the Miller estate for several days, unwilling to leave. So, Ethan had no choice but to ask his cousin to impersonate him, to make her thoroughly believe that the person she had seen that day was not Ethan, but Evan. It seemed the effect was indeed significant. For the next few days, Ethan heard no news of Serafina coming to the Miller estate. In a villa in Paris, Serafina stared at the documents before her, her face growing paler and paler. How could it be? How could she have mistaken him? Even if it was just a glance, Serafina was certain it was Ethan, not someone else. But why had he suddenly turned into another man? Had Ethan really died in that plane crash? Was everything now just her hallucination? The light in Serafina's eyes grew dimmer. Just then, the butler knocked on her study door. CEO Shaw, someone is here to see you. Serafina frowned. She had no friends in Paris. Who would come looking for her? When Serafina walked down the stairs and saw the extremely familiar figure sitting on the sofa, she thought she was dreaming again. Hearing the sound, the man on the sofa stood up and looked towards her. In that instant, Serafina laughed self-deprecatingly. It was indeed her hallucination, because the person before her was Evan Miller, the man she had mistaken that day. Evan Miller, seeing Serafina come down, also stood up. Ms. Shaw, about last time, I didn't understand the situation clearly, so I apologize to you. Serafina shook her head. It was my mistake last time. I should be the one apologizing to you. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Serafina asked Evan his purpose for coming. Evan's expression turned serious. It's like this. Before my cousin passed away, he sent me a voice recording of his last words. There's something in it concerning you. Evan paused, observing Serafina's expression, and tentatively asked, would you like to listen to it now? Serafina Shaw remained standing where she was, stiffly nodding. Soon, the man opened the voice recorder on his phone. After a burst of static, a familiar, long unheard voice emerged from the speaker. Serafina, when you hear these words, I imagine I will have already left this world. I know you were reborn, but I don't know why you were unwilling to acknowledge me, even hurting me repeatedly, making me constantly doubt if the you who loved me in our past life was real. But now, it doesn't matter to me anymore. After all, I'm about to die. Ethan Miller chuckled softly, a hint of relief and liberation in his tone. In our past life, I wronged you first. I was too willful then, and I didn't love you, causing you great pain. So, ending up like that was what I deserved. This time, I originally wanted to compensate you, to love you well, but it seems you don't accept my compensation. I don't mind. Consider the pain you inflicted on me as my compensation to you, Serafina. We're even. Live well from now on. Don't stay stuck in the past for me. If there's a next life, let's not meet again. We are not suited for each other. The recording played out. A long time passed, so long it felt like a century. Serafina finally spoke slowly. Could you please send me a copy of this recording? Evan Miller was taken aback, then nodded. Of course. Before Evan left, Serafina used his phone to send a reply to Ethan, as if responding to the Ethan in heaven. After Evan left, Serafina curled up on the floor, repeatedly listening to the short recording. Live well from now on. Don't stay stuck in the past for me. We are not suited for each other. Not suited? They had loved each other so much, yet they had missed each other time and time again. So cruelly. Perhaps they truly weren't suited for each other. At this thought, a sharp pain shot through Serafina's right knuckles. She looked down to see her nails had dug in her palm, crimson beads of blood dripping along her palm lines, blooming like dark roses on the tile floor. The sound of rain outside suddenly became deafening. The cold, damp air seeped in through the ajar window like a giant hand from hell, tightly enveloping her, crushing her bit by bit. Each fragment reflected Ethan from different times and spaces. Ethan on the high school basketball court playing with classmates. Ethan in a suit at college graduation, waiting for her to walk towards him, and Ethan after being reborn, crying as he held her. Finally, Ethan with empty eyes, his back to her, walking towards the airport. "Ethan, I can't do it," she murmured into the void. When Serafina closed her eyes, all she saw was Ethan's image. How could she continue to live without him? She slowly put down her phone and buried her head in her arms. As a clap of thunder split the night sky, Serafina finally heard a sob escape her throat like a trapped animal with an iron chain around its neck. The heavy rain fell all night. As dawn pierced through the clouds, the rain also stopped. Dead leaves on the sycamore tree dripped water, one drop falling in her dry eye socket. When Serafina's plane once again cut through the clouds, Ethan finally listened to Serafina's message from the text Evan had forwarded. Serafina's words were filled with sorrow. "Ethan, I don't know if you in heaven can hear this, but I still have to say I'm sorry. I was reborn, and I do still love you. It's just that I was unwilling to accept it. I loved you for so long. Why couldn't you look back at me? Initially, on my friend's advice, I adopted a cold approach towards you, wanting you to realize how important my love was to you, to make you bow your head to me first. But then you were also reborn, and you swore to treat me well, to love me. So I thought, all right, let me see how deep your love for me truly is. That's why I couldn't stop myself from hurting you time and time again. Julian Vance was not my lover. He was just an actor I hired. I never expected him to treat you that way. So I sent him to prison. Without my permission, he will spend the rest of his life there. You said in your message for me to forget you and live well, but I can't forget you at all. I once thought about dying with you, but I was afraid you wouldn't accept me. So I want to live well, to atone for my sins for you, to take care of your parents for you, your friends, and that cluster of roses in the garden you loved so much, as well as the grandfather you respected most. One day, after all these things are taken care of, I'll come and find you. I hope then you can give me a chance to make amends. Ethan, I love you very much, and I'm sorry. If there's a next life, please don't meet me again." With a soft click, Ethan turned off his phone screen. His heart was filled with a myriad of complex emotions, his nose tingling. He raised his hand to wipe away the tears that had escaped his eyes. He told himself over and over, this is for the best, this is for the best. Their meeting was a mistake from the start. Now, going their separate ways was the best ending for them. "Serafina, I will grant your wish. I will never meet you again. Let's go our separate ways like this. And also, we will never see each other again." End of novel.